Robin would have loved that. He may be enjoying it. And so everything arrives in the fullness of time. Thank you for being here today. My name is Joseph Lennon. I'm the Director of Irish Studies, a Professor of English, and an Associate Dean at Villanova University. I graduated from Knox in 1990 with a major in English and what would have been minors in theater and biology. Robin got me my first job as a professor here at Knox in 2000, and I returned to teach here for an amazing year. Robin, a football player who became a poet, playwright, and professor, had stars on his mind in the day and sunrise in his eyes at night. Deeply rooted to the Driftless area, as well as to Galesburg and to Knox, he traveled the world to read, to teach, and to learn. I wanted to deliver these words today in the second person, in case Robin is listening. When we last met in October, he told me that if at all possible, he would come back and give me a sign from the next world. He would tap me on the shoulder or appear in the wind or in the night sky, give me some kind of sign from the beyond. That is, unless he forgot. Robin and I laughed every time we met. He was a friend, a colleague, a mentor, a teacher to me. To others of us, he was a father, a grandfather, husband, lover, and still to others, something far less categorizable. Robin heard me when I was ill. He taught me when I was stubborn. I loved him as a brother. Before I'll introduce the speakers, I want to tell just a couple of short stories. In 1986, I arrived on this campus with a skateboard and a partially shaved head full of ideas. Margot Cole, Bill and Sidney Brady, Bob and Ginny Hellinga, Ed Neas, Steve Feinberg, John Wagner, Penny Gold, Doug Wilson, Laura Lane, Roy and Corinne Anderson, Peter Bailey, Ivan Davidson, I could go on, Lance Factor, Bob Whitlatch, and so many others made Knox that time. When Robin and I first met, we were very skeptical of each other, but we soon grew close in the cauldron of a fiction workshop. I went to his office once feeling a bit alien and spoke to him about out walking the train lines at night and riding freight trains around the changing yards. Instead of asking me to stop, he asked if he could join me one night. And so we walked out in the moonlight down to see the trains heading out across the continent, enriched by the sights and a bit less lonely. Another spring day, years later, I walked into the Gizmo and saw Robin engaged in deep conversation with another student on the tale of some great discovery. In a word, I was jealous, but I realized then what it was that Robin could do, how he could listen and engage people on their terms. When I drove up to Buck Creek Farm last October, I knew it would be the last time I would see him. He had watched himself go through the stages of dying with a detached eye, curious to the end about this process, as if making notes for his next class. Over a couple of days, we talked between naps and meals for hours on end. We reviewed our first loves, our children, our teaching, grandchildren, grandparents, our writing, our woods, our projects, our beliefs, our disappointments, our amazement at the world. We talked of his Tolstoyan wedding with Liz Janke, his love for Liz Carlin, who saved him and brought him so much joy. He was hungry to talk about the world, about the light, about the breeze. But we also talked about breakups, lost loves, his deep love for his daughters, his dreams for his grandchildren. He spoke of his passion for the land and his desire to conserve the farm and its woodland acres. He also retold me this story that he had first told me in 1992 when I was passing through Galesburg on the way to join some Earth First protests. He said he had once had a student in the 1970s, and he had taught her about the Weather Underground and the SDS. She had dropped out of Knox and returned to Chicago, and then returned later in a pink Cadillac. And he wanted me to make sure I told that detail if I ever retold it. And she walked him back and asked him to look in the trunk, and he opened up the trunk, and it was full of explosives, of weapons and ammunition. She confessed she was supposed to deliver them to an underground group and felt conflicted. Robin felt responsible. They talked and thought about it that afternoon. In the end, he watched her pink Cadillac drive away and never really knew what happened. Robin was not scared of life, nor really even of death, but I think sometimes he was scared of the influence he could have, particularly on his students. He felt tremendous responsibility that came with his talent. He worried that he might encourage some of us too far. One late night at the seminary pub, I explained to Robin my metaphysical vision of eternity, life, death, energy, the cosmos, what Jesus got right and what he got wrong. He listened and smiled along broadly. I asked if he thought I was crazy. He said no. He shook his head and said, "I have the same vision. I taught it to you." We laughed because it was the perfect joke, but neither of us needed initiation then. We also laughed because it was partly true. Another late night in January in 2001, Robin and I had a few drinks after an event. As we walked up Seminary Street, he tried to convince me to drive to Wisconsin with him to skin a deer that he had found on the side of the road. I turned the conversation to the Lutheran church, and we approached and said offhandedly that it would be easy to climb. He asked me how I would do it, so I pointed to a drain pipe, a window ledge, a scalable wall up to the roof. He dared me and prompted me to do it, and so I began, but halfway up the climb, he called me down. When I got back, he was disturbed, not by any danger, I hadn't really gotten that high, but by his ability and his enthusiasm to prompt me to scale a church wall with drink taken at 2 a.m. In the broom of freewheeling discussion, like family argument or friendly debate, he might prompt someone away from their own good, he thought. I think this is partly why he was so considered, so painstakingly careful in his wording, in his teaching, in his writing, in his administering. He knew the influence he could wield. His energy was toward discovery, and it was an infectious futurism that he had. He prompted all of us to do more with our time here. You need not have been afraid, Robin. The fact that Liz Carlin Metz and his wonderful daughters, Lisa and Rana, and his grandsons have gathered us here, his grandchildren, to remember him, shows us how great he was to all of us. So here's to what he got us to do and what we may do yet. And I would like to ask Rana and Lisa to come up and begin our celebrations. Thank you very much.
My dad would be so pleased. So I can tell you that he would be humbled, and he would be getting a hell of a kick out of this, and I know that he is here with us. So, we want to thank you. Thank you so much for making the effort to be here with us today to celebrate this man that we loved, that we were awed by, that we were charged by, and sometimes frustrated by. I had the great pleasure of meeting my dad exactly 55 years ago at this moment.
Happy birthday, Lisa.
That's not why I say it.
Well, it is your birthday.
I say that because only you and I can speak to him as the father that he was. Dad was greeted at my birth with, "Congratulations, you're a mother." And he said it was the only time he almost fainted. Thankfully, after the blood rushed back to his face and he understood that that was a poor choice of words on the part of the doctor. And the doctor never made that mistake again. And I am so grateful that he was able to be our father, because he was a hell of a good father. I love that there are themes that echo in the ways that we know him. Things that I want to tell you that he shared with us and that he taught us, those values that were so important to him. Values like the love of the land, the love of connection with people, his ability to see so clearly connections, to have exacting, minute attention to detail, and have such a broad, vast vision that collected it all together, whether that was in his storytelling or the way he put a piece of theater art together. He was a man that had many talents, and I feel like we appreciated those, and we got to not only experience them up close and personal, but I think he shared some of those through genetic gift. So one of the things that my dad was really good at was listening. He taught us to listen. Sometimes he taught us to listen because we couldn't get a damn word in edgewise.
True.
But he also taught us to really hear and bring all of our senses to the moment, to understand the complexities of people and circumstances. I loved how complex he was, and again, sometimes it was overwhelming. I have powerful memories of our dad as a father, really giving us the time and listening and understanding and bringing out more than we were saying on the surface. And he was great at that. It was truly a gift that he shared with so many of us. His insights, his wise words, and the way that he made everybody feel that they were the only one in that moment. Was something that we all have experienced, and I'll confess, I've experienced some jealousy at times as well. But he had a gift of really being in the moment and of making you feel very special and very heard. He gave us a bounty of gifts. His passion for nature that led him to not only plant trees for everyone that he loved, but to plant hundreds more beyond that. He was an active conservationist and a good steward of the land. He shared that with our children, and it's a value that we carry on. Oh, I can't really read my notes anymore, and I know that you'll understand. It's not just the tears, but the overwhelm. So I'll speak extemporaneously and say that among the other gifts that he gave us was his ability to be a complex and visionary thinker. I had the privilege, when he was in the hospital, of experiencing a private lecture that he was actually giving to all of you. It was a remarkable thing. He spoke for an hour on Carl Sandburg and Dorothea Tanning, and then he spoke about the farm and the land and the history and the ecology. And I was in awe. And to me, it was so clear that his lifeblood was literally about teaching. He taught us all the time, and that was a great gift, even in the ways that he introduced a book to his grandson, which I'll let you read, Rana, if you want to.
Yes, sure. To our dearest Duncan, as you think back years from now and recall your first birthday, of course you'll recall it. Always remember that Carl Sandburg, who was born in your mother's hometown and came to roam the wide world over, never forgot the place and the people who first sustained him. Sometimes he even called memory the first condition of love. That's what I think too. With love and devotion, Oompa and Liz. So this was for a 1-year-old.
that just shows you how he was always getting us to aspire and reach beyond what we thought our capabilities were. And I will tell you that I have, as he was dying and I was saying goodbye to him and trying to thank him for all of the gifts, the words weren't really coming very well for me. But he nodded and graciously accepted and said, "Don't worry, honey, when the time comes, you'll find the right words." So I'm going to read a poem here that jumped out at me, part of a poem. Again, Carl Sandburg, called "Little Girl, Be Careful What You Say." So, little girl, when you speak greetings, when you tell jokes, make wishes or prayers, be careful, be careless, be careful, and be what you wish to be. That was a great gift that Dad gave us, to be bold and to be fearless and to really recognize and see when we were being brave. Thank you, Dad, for that. And I hope I found the right words for you.
Yes, you did. Thank you.
I'm going to next introduce Carl Norgren. Carl was a Knox student when Robin first began at Knox. Robin and Carl came to admire one another as writers. Carl's extraordinary talent as a creative entrepreneur inspired Robin to arrange for Carl to teach entrepreneurism at Knox, and though he moved on, he continues to inspire Knox students when he comes home to visit. Carl was also the source of the story for Robin's acclaimed play, A Nun's First American Christmas, a venture that brought them full circle. Come on up, Carl.
Thank you, Lisa. Lisa served me so well when we were standing out there before we all came in, and I was holding on tight. And I asked Lisa's memory. I asked if I could explore her memory for a moment, if she remembered when in 1973, the winter of 73, I had spent a long weekend at the farm with Robin. It was snowing. Lisa and her sister and their mother arrived. And Robin thought it was really important for them to get on the road because it was snowing. And so I joined them in their van and we hit the road. And right north of Moline, that snowfall became a snowstorm. And right about then, I could see by the look in Lisa's face that she remembered. In fact, she quickly said, in fact, that was the worst snowstorm that she ever drove in her life. Well, her mother had been behind the wheel right up until the fall became a storm, and she asked me to take the wheel. And I brought that up with Lisa out there because I realized it was the first time I had experienced Robin's spirit without his physical presence also being there. Because the minute I took the wheel, I was confident that Robin's hands were on the wheel with me and that he was whispering in my ear that, yes, we can make it, we can navigate the storm, we can do it together, and we did. And Lisa gave me permission to share that with you this afternoon, and so thank you very much. I wrote some things down because I wasn't sure. But I wound up deciding this is exactly what I wanted to say to you all about Robin Metz. And I got to spend part of an afternoon with Robin shortly before he passed. And the last thing he said to me means even more to me standing with you now than it did then, and it meant everything to me then. When he said, "Carl, where my poems are read, you will be there, and wherever your stories are read, I'll be there." And I took that deep into my heart, and it was mine, and it was my own very precious thing. But now, of course, it's clear that this theater is filled with folks for whom he felt the same, and with whom he shared his same intimate goodbyes in a manner that was a special gift for you too. And so doesn't that mean that he's here with us today? I really didn't share you, Robin, with any of these folks here except for Lisa. I wasn't part of any of your really wonderful, wonder-filled communities after I left here, but now I get to share you with others who loved you as I loved you, and that's a joyous thing for me. And all day long yesterday, our love for you was being shared with students who were served by those of us who arrived early and reached out to the school and said, please, can we serve the students while we're here? In your name, Robin, in your name. We asked if we can do that, and there's a bunch of people here who did that yesterday. And so here's what I want you to know, Robin, and it's that each time I brought you my best idea, my best writing, you would so often do two things at once for me, as you first appreciated the best of it, and that not only made me happier when I received your blessing, but you then transformed it in front of my eyes as you made it so much better, and you helped me understand why it was so much better and where that improvement came from, and I was privileged to experience it with you each time, and I thank you, and I try to do that for my students, and thank you very much, Robin, for doing that for me. It's been suggested that I might add a few words about your early days at Knox, having arrived on campus just 2 years after you did, so sit back for just a minute, please, and I'll do that. It will just be a few words, and it has to begin with, what kind of dude do you have to be to arrive on a campus at the age of 25 years old and become a college professor just as these campuses are becoming batshit crazy? My view of Robin in those first days was one part unabashed fan and one part, I confessed, doting son. I think I needed a dose of father figure in my creative guru. And while the rest of the students loved him wholeheartedly and delighted in his presence amongst us, watching him act the rebel one moment and the rascal the next as he tamed the waves of those crazy days, surfing them as theater one moment and channeling them for good purpose the next. And from my respectful, doting son distance, I studied him, hoping to learn the habits of character and mind that I could shape into my own. And when in my senior year and the additional year I lived here after, I traveled with him frequently to his farm, he made it clear he had no interest in being anything like a father to me, but was appreciative of our friendship. And if there's any rebel in me, Robin, and if there's any rascal in me, Robin, you are the father of it. Thanks, Robin. I was your anang, you were my turtle. Some of you know what that means. See you again soon.
Thank you, Carl. And thank you, Liz prepared these notes. Jay Madsen is going to come up next. Robin and Jay shared much in common: poetry, music, and art, but most particularly a common vision and love of Galesburg. Jay's vision, realized for Seminary Street, has invigorated the city and helped to define its culture. They shared many adventures, the latest being the grand vision for Galesburg and its history as the railroad's crossroads of the nation, a vision that will soon be achieved. Please welcome Jay. Come on up.
Thank you, Liz, for giving me the opportunity to celebrate Robin. Talk about a perfect fit. The stars aligning, karma, whatever metaphor you choose. I can't imagine a better match than to place Robin Metz at Knox College in 1967. What good fortune it was for all of us. Like so many others, I was enriched by knowing Robin. Remember this lyric, letting the days go by, let the water hold me down, letting the days go by, water flowing underground, into the blue again in the silent water, under the rocks and stones, there's water underground. That's from the Talking Heads song, Once in a Lifetime. It reminded me, meeting Robin in the late 60s was one of those once-in-a-lifetime good fortunes for me. And now he's gone, but I think of Robin's influence as something flowing underground, unseen, but undeniably present. Ours was an unconventional friendship. We had times when we worked closely, spending long, fascinating hours together. There were also long intervals when our busy lives rarely crossed, but we always reconnected. In those sessions of getting caught up with one another's lives after a long absence, they were magical. Robin was a complex person, and I've heard stories that he could be difficult at times. Is that the word? Difficult? Perhaps I was lucky, but we never had any difficulty in more than 50 years. We were in our mid-20s when we met. We found common ground right away. He had a fabulous mustache, so right away I trusted him. And we sold fabulous Ganesh incense at the Calico Cat, so right away he trusted me. We shared anti-war sentiments regarding Vietnam. In the 1972 presidential election, we were absolutely certain that George McGovern would win. Of course, we celebrated the work of Woodward and Bernstein regarding Watergate. Here in town, one of our first aligned causes was opposition to building Sandburg Mall. We felt that Mayor Cabine was correct in asserting that a regional shopping center would destroy the fabric of the healthy downtown, and that the city could not support two distinct retail centers. Robin, of course, added the charge that the name chosen by the shopping center developers was an abuse of Carl Sandburg's legacy. Needless to say, we lost that one too. But it cemented our friendship. Many of you knew Robin through your gown relationship, but there was a vibrant town side too. In the 70s, only a handful of people in Galesburg had heard of the National Trust for Historic Preservation, but Robin was one of them. He realized the value of bringing the Trust's Main Street project to town. Robin was a preservationist, and he was the first person in town I knew who linked heritage tourism to economic development. He supported our early efforts to form the Galesburg Railroad Museum. He signed on to help the Orpheum Theater. He encouraged the preservation of brick streets and the historic street lamps in residential neighborhoods. He brought his passion for tree planting in the city, even his own secret commando efforts. He helped us with the formation of the first farmers market downtown. He supported an annual Carl Sandburg Festival. He served on the concept team for the National Railroad Hall of Fame. He was a prime mover in designating the Dorothea Tanning as a local landmark. He always added his voice to projects that improve the quality of life in the community, initiatives like the Quiet Zone to silent train whistles. And Robin deserves special mention for helping to save Whiting Hall. It was a pet project. Robin pleaded the case to Knox for preservation over demolition. He helped seek private developers to find the solution, converting it to senior housing. It was a win-win for the college and the town. I'm convinced that Whiting Hall is still here today due in part to Robin's dedicated effort at that time. And local politics was always of interest. One of my fondest memories was the election of Mayor Jerry Miller in the early 80s. Robin and I volunteered to serve as coordinators of his campaign. And we were to map out a strategy, prepare advertising, write speeches, and prep our candidate for debates. Robin would spend long days teaching, and I was busy with my restaurant work until 9 or 10 p.m. But then we would get together at my office and work into the night. For weeks, we worked together on the campaign, and we had a ball. We created our own deep throat character, Robin's idea. We left secret messages for Register Mail news reporters in a clandestine way. In those days, there were open stacks at the public library, so we would walk in and plant a message in a special book. Robin loved picking out the book, which always had a reference to our populist campaign. Then from a payphone, an anonymous voice would call the tip to the newsroom. The anonymous voice would say, "Go to the library, check out All the King's Men, page 127. And of course, they'd find our note there. Sometimes the nature of the message was an implied deficiency in our own candidate. So maybe it led to a question being raised that we were most prepared to answer. It wasn't dirty politics, it was clever politics. We had so much fun, and we won. Robin had no reservation about speaking truth to power on controversial issues. Some years later, CRA group homes appeared. Those were community residential alternatives for developmentally disabled persons. When they became prevalent in a less affluent ward, Robin stood in front of a packed city council meeting and eloquently shredded the argument framed by the developer's attorney. Robin's speech for fairness, which endorsed spreading the support for CRAs equally in all wards, it was unassailable. Robin loved to support the underdog. Robin and I shared another serendipitous situation when both of our mothers, in their 90s, wound up living at the Kensington Retirement Center in downtown. We were delighted when our mothers became fast friends. At times, we would join our mothers in the dining room to catch up on the latest Kensington gossip. Oh, it was always charged with intrigue between other residents or staff turnover. It became a special time for us. We would just sit and listen and often wind up in tears from laughter. One time famously included our mother's frustration with the old women who were bumming rides to the grocery store with them. We asked our mothers, who were in their 90s, remember, how old are these other women? Oh, 100 and 101 was their somewhat disgusted reply. Of course, it wasn't just their age, it was the damn walkers that took up all the room in the trunk for the groceries. From our earliest times together, Robin impressed me with his robust, precise vocabulary and his facility with putting phrases and ideas together. He had a thoughtful and mesmerizing way of speaking. He could find connections and links that were not always apparent, but he bridged them. And he had a quick wit and a wonderful laugh, and he was sensitive. In those early years, I was grateful for Robin's interest in my life. While Mary and I worked on developing Seminary Street, he was devoted to our cause. I've always felt that Robin gave more to me than I could give to him. In reading his students' comments and hearing remarks by other friends, this seems to be a common assessment. Robin had boundless empathy. Boundless empathy. When I first heard of Robin's cancer returning and leaving him in an inoperable state, we spoke on the phone. I was choking up and tearful. Immediately, it was Robin comforting me when the sympathy should have gone his direction. He had come to terms with his fate. I can't think of anyone more prepared for death than Robin. In our last face-to-face, we spent an hour together, and the conversation covered the waterfront as it always did. It ranged from our fond remembrances to a recent shared fascination we had with astrophysics. His curiosity in searching was not dimmed. As we hugged and said a last goodbye, I asked how he felt about dying. He said he remained open to any possibilities, and then added, "I like the laughing Buddha." There is a Buddhist saying, even death is not to be feared by one who has lived wisely. That was certainly validated by Robin Metz. In closing, and in keeping with Robin's suggestion to never pass up an opportunity when you got a captive audience like this, I would like to read a poem. I wrote this for Robin and sent it to him before his death. And it's just titled, My Dear Robin. Writing a farewell poem to you is impossible because you are the poet. I'm glad you're not afraid, but it's still a goddamn gut punch. I tear up at the slightest tug of grief and easily teeter into maudlin, so I'll promise something bracing. I will always recall your strong hairline on your powerful skull. If you hadn't been so educated, you could have been a champion cage fighter. I don't even like cage fighting, but I like that image of you. How many times your vocabulary made my day. Unlike Trump, you truly have the best words. Do you remember that evening at your farm decades ago? We listened to one of the first broadcasts of Prairie Home Companion. Roy and Kareen's kids were small enough to roll down the hillside in a tire. That night, did we have a care in the world? I can't measure half a century of your friendship. How we celebrated when our mothers found one another at the Kensington. Just like they did, we had a lovely time together. If you cross over to the other side, I'll expect to hear from you. Until then, my dear cage-fighting poet, I'll picture you inside a tire, rolling down that hillside at your farm without a care in the world. Thanks.
Thank you, Jay. We're going to next hear from Marilyn Webb, who came to Robin's attention through her Pulitzer Prize-nominated book, The Good Death, which he taught in his course on death and dying. Robin recruited Marilyn to teach journalism in the infant program that he initiated and that David Amor ably helmed. Marilyn found a home at Knox and a brother she had not anticipated in Robin. Quite simply, they adored one another.
I'm not a scarf person, but I wore this in honor of Robin. Robin took me by surprise. I was happily living in New York when I met him. I had just published a book, and I was teaching at Columbia University J School. Amongst the things I was teaching, though, were about history of progressive journalism. So, of course, there was S.S. McClure, and Ida Tarbell, and Carl Sandburg. And I don't know how Robin found out about this, but he got me. So one day, I got a call from Bill Colby. Is Bill here? Bill was, yeah, there you are. I'm going to talk about you. I had this book, which Joe just talked about, on death and dying, and Bill actually helped me throughout the whole thing. Bill is I don't know what year you graduated, but he's a Knox alum, and he talked to me about Galesburg, and I had never heard this place before. I was like, I have no idea where it is. But then I felt honored because he had asked me to meet his friend, who was Robin. Bill had helped me because he was the attorney who went before the Supreme Court in the Nancy Cruzan case, a very landmark case, and he won. And so I felt indebted to him. And he said, my friend Robin wrote this poetry book about death and dying, and I think you ought to read it. I didn't want to admit this, but I really am not a poetry person. So Bill just sent it anyway, and I read it, and I was shocked because I actually loved the book. So then Bill must have told Robin. Immediately, Robin called up and said he was on his way to New York with Liz, and could we have lunch? So we had lunch, and the guy was a lunatic. He was so funny. And Liz was a riot, too. I have to just say, I have to share this, Liz. She kept putting her lettuce pieces on the side of the plate. And I was like, what are you doing? And finally she said to me, I just don't like lettuce bones. So I was like, okay, so these are my people. So the next thing that happened was Robin said he was teaching the course with Diana and Tim Kasser on death and dying here. And he said Bill was coming, and there was a magnet for me. So he said, could you come and speak? So I thought, okay, I could come and speak, and I was actually speaking all over, so why not come to Galesburg? So then I got here, and I did my little talk, and the seduction began. I don't know that I was ready for this, but he took me to McClure's grave, which, as you all probably know, is in Hope Cemetery. He took me to Carl Sandburg's house. He took me to the Lincoln Douglas debate. He took me to the TKS office. He sat me down and he said, do you know that S.S. McClure started this newspaper? This newspaper has been here for whatever it was at that time, 130 years. And this was his legacy. And he said, I want you to know you're sitting in this very area where his thoughts came from. So I was like, whoa. Every place we walked around, he'd tell me about the history of something that I already was in awe of. So we're driving back to the airport, and he says to me, I said to him, wow, I really thought this place was great. I would love to teach at a place like this. This is so great. And he said, well, as a matter of fact, why don't you come and start a journalism program in honor of our legacy, S.S. McClure? We could be all doing muckraker stuff here, and you could be, blah, blah, blah. And my mind was like completely like, oh, that would be really great. And then I said to him, Robin, I live in New York. Oh, that's no problem. You could come 10 weeks a year. Well, Robin, I have a husband and I have an apartment. Oh, we give you an apartment. Well, what about a car? I'll give you a car. Don't worry. So I thought this guy was, really authorized to give me a job. Behind the scenes, Larry was getting phone calls night and day. Oh, he said, this person's coming and we need to do this. And I don't know what Larry went through, but a little bit later, like a few days later, I get this phone call from Larry and he says, oh, well, so I hear you want to come here, and would you like the title of Distinguished Professor of Journalism? And I was like already completely, like, these people are just crazy. So I said, I think I'd rather be queen. So, I don't think Larry was authorized to make me queen, but he did give me the job. So by the time I came here, I realized, okay, the plane tickets were in place for my husband to visit me. The apartment was all set up. I saw Tom Foley here. I guess Carl is here too. It was in their building. And the first thing I noticed was the car. Guess what that car was? He wanted his mother to stop driving. So he gave me his mother's car. So I had a car, and then I had this apartment. I was really happy to be there, but it wasn't what I was used to. So the first thing that happened there was, and I walked in, and at that time, Tom's and Carla's son, Gordy, I think he was 4, he told me what the ropes were in Galesburg. He said, first of all, you have to walk with an umbrella outside because crows can poop on your head. So and he said, and next you have to be sure, like my mom always carries tissues, and so you can wipe your head if they get on your head. And he said, and then there was all these sounds of birds screaming all over the place. And I was like, what is that? Well, it turned out, and I don't think they have this anymore, but some of you may remember, they had loudspeakers of hawks in killing crows. They're amplified from all over the buildings around my building. And so night and day, I'd hear these hawks, "Ah!" like, kill. And I just like, this is my place. I really love this place. So, okay, so we started a journalism program. First things that happened was I didn't have any plan. So I thought, oh, okay, Robin had a vision. Robin's vision somehow was enormously expansive, but already he had fit me right as a pawn into it. So we had people going on their police ride-alongs in the police cars. We had them covering the city. We had them getting bylines in the local paper, and lo and behold, they started getting awards. They got state awards for the stories in the Register Mail. These weren't against students. They were like real journalist awards. And then TKS started getting award after award. It wasn't just state awards, it was national awards. And lo and behold, I realized when Robin speaks, the vision grows. He created this vision, and there I was in the middle of it, stuck in his vision. It was like being put in Robin's dream. And I have to say it was the happiest time of my life. He was creating a legacy for Knox out of the legacy we already have. McClure started here. He created progressive journalism in America, and Robin wanted to recapture it for this area and for this college. And you have no idea how much he worked hard to help me see it. David and I were like, David's my other husband. We were glued together creating this vision that Robin had. And I guess I just want to say, this is going to sound hokey, but Robin was a genius. He was a magnet and a genius. He was a fantastic friend, and I'm happy to say that I think Robin will already become a Knox legacy as time goes on. Thank you so much for having me here for all those years.
Thank you, Marilyn. Ross Kelley was a student of both Robin and Liz. His creative voice won him virtually every writing award offered by the Department of English, as well as the prestigious Associated Colleges of the Midwest Nick Adams Award. He went on to help foster an orphanage in the troubled South Sudan, a journey chronicled in his extraordinary blog. Ross also received the Knox College Young Alumni Achievement Award at Robin and Liz's nomination. And I was last on this stage with Ross when we did a play, War and Peace. Ross, come on back up.
Given Robin's sort of, let's say, complicated relationship with technology, I feel it's a bit sacrilegious that I put my notes on an iPad. I could go on about how Robin never sent an email, I think, in his entire life, but that's not what I came here to talk to you about today. Robin's generosity seemed limitless. His love seemed to know no bounds. Even with all his gifts and insights and passion, he wasn't invincible. He was a gentle soul in a shattered world, and he paid the price for giving a damn. He wasn't the indifferent artist paring his fingernails on the periphery of the human condition. He embraced the mess of living and loving and creating art in the here and now. Almost 19 years ago, a friend of mine told me that Robin had been so devastated by the final outcome of the presidential race that he was unable to get out of bed for approximately 2 days. The event in question, the victory of a pretend cowboy named George W. Bush, had vast global ramifications that we continue to live with today. I believe Robin caught a glimpse of the endless war on terror, the garish parade of lies, and the many lives snuffed out over the past 2 decades. And so, like any sane person who happened to experience a blood-curdling vision of the future, Robin climbed into bed and did not emerge for at least 48 hours. Now, regardless of whether this story is true or not, the fact that it is conceivable to anyone who knew Robin's heart reveals how much he cared about this world, its future, and each one of us. The stumbling, sometimes foolish, sometimes transcendent creatures whose propensity for destruction is matched by an insatiable appetite for beauty and love. I'll say it again. Robin was a gentle soul in a shattered world, and he paid the price for giving a damn. He could not have emerged from that bed 19 years ago to continue the relentless and often thankless work of a teacher and artist. He could not have remained so resolute in his beliefs. He could not have remained so uncomfortably honest without a phalanx of love surrounding him. Friends and family, colleagues and students, the people gathered in this theater today. There's one person here who I must single out for her selfless and steadfast contributions to Robin's life and legacy, especially his elaborate conspiracy. And I think many of the people today have been talking about his elaborate conspiratorial plans, his elaborate conspiracy to bring about revolutionary change through the proliferation of art, poetry, theater, and all the other good things that quicken the blood in the veins of the universe. Robin's wife and colleague, Liz, dreamed up 10,000 plans with him, and together I believe they fulfilled at least half of them. She made certain that the third and final act of his life was his finest. When the fierce soul that they both loved burned out, Liz stood by Robin's side. An entire constellation had vanished from the heavens, leaving an upside-down abyss in its wake. And so she took Robin's shipwrecked heart, took in the breath of his splintered body, cut away the bright work beyond repair, peeled barnacles from parts salvageable, then bent and rewed the old and new planks to the frame, softly reconstructing a vessel worthy of the sea and reverent of its tempests. Thank you, Liz, for nourishing the fire we saw in Robin's eyes that were simultaneously mischievous and deadly serious, youthful and almost supernaturally perceptive. Thank you for keeping the flames alive when they faltered and ached in the blue midnights that you shared. And thank you for encouraging Robin to transform his most vulnerable and his most necessary dreams into lantern light, the kind of fire that we can and we will carry with us.
Thank you, Ross. John Wagner, Professor Emeritus from the Department of Sociology and Anthropology, who along with Professor Stuart Allison in biology and Robin established the inaugural Green Oaks program, an immersive, integrated living, learning community. Robin deeply admired John's significant and delicate talent as a musician and was moved and delighted when John presented Liz Janke Metz and Robin with this evocative waltz at their wedding at Buck Creek Farm in Wisconsin. So John's going to say a few words and then play the song on the dulcimer.
Thank you. Robin was a wonderful colleague and a wonderful friend. We seemed that we hardly ever met that we didn't come up with a new idea to do something. sometimes a theater idea or a course. So many dreamed up courses that were never put into action, and some that were, especially the Green Oaks term, which I think has been a great success over the years, largely thanks to Robin's visionary participation in that first year. I think it would not be what it is today. There's a magic to it that lives from Robin's vision of it. But also, Robin was a great friend. His home in Wisconsin, his second home, away from home, the farm, seemed like a family home. Our children and our colleagues' children played together there from the time they were toddlers, and felt like going to Grandpa's farm. I remember one time when my son was about 4, and we pulled up and pulled into the barnyard, the farmyard, and pulled up to a building. I said, "That's Robin's tobacco barn." And Nick, my son, said, "Wow, Robin must smoke a lot." But anyway, so when I got my first hammered dulcimer, Robin was a great fan of music, of course, of all kinds of music. I got my first weather-beaten, old, 100-year-old raggedy hammered dulcimer and strung it up. Robin was enchanted with the sound of it and was very encouraging. In fact, often asked me to play for events in his life that were important turning points. I made this little waltz for Robin's wedding with Liz Janke at the farm. I called it Buck Creek Voyage. It's now become sort of remembered as the Buck Creek Wedding Waltz. And so I'm going to play that for you now. Oh, I just want also to say that in making that little tune, I wanted to evoke the sunny hills and the misty hollows of Robin's farm and of the driftless region, and the warmth of his fire and the camaraderie of his table. So I hope some of that comes through. And Robin, wherever you are, I hope that these sounds follow you through the cosmos.
Sorry, it all just goes too quickly. If Robin were here, he would slow this down. Kelley Lynn Hogan was a student of Robin's in creative writing and established herself as a stunning actress in the Department of Theater. When Liz Carlin Metz and Robin founded Vitalist Theater in Chicago 21 years ago, they turned to Kelley as a Chicago actress to join them on the board. Kelley starred in numerous award-winning productions at Vitalist as well as many other companies and has remained at the heart of the company she helped to found. Come on up, Kelley.
Never say anything that doesn't improve on silence. Richard Yates, A Good School. Liz Jenke, after her death, had some requited things to say to each of us left, silenced, grieving. To me, be still, darling. To Robin, more life, love, make art. To Liz Carlin, choose the rare, sister. Wide-eyed and disbelieving, yet ecstatic from our numinous profound visitations, we heeded her clarion calls. Every angel is terrifying, and so I hold myself back and swallow the call note of my dark sobbing. Angels, they say, don't know whether it is the living they are moving among or the dead. Rainier Maria Rilke, Duino elegies, first and second. I stopped, forging onward, focus only forward, paused, poised. Robin fled, foundered, finally found respite in motion and solace in the poetic arrangement of crafted word, as yet untried. Liz joined him in journey, morning light shafting through Italian bedroom window, aware how present the rare in Robin. I don't believe grief passes away. It has its time and place forever. More time is added to it. It becomes a story within a story. But grief and griever alike endure. Wendell Berry, J. Crow. We aligned to birth Vitalist Theater, storied in Chicago, love child of Sibylline vision, poet, playwright, producer, installation artist, curator, host, to an international procession of enigmatic figures. Robin poured forth his intrepid promises to the embodiment of memory in her namesake place of play. His conviction to make meaning of an arrested, requisite life was the salve that closed the wound, faded the permanent scar, and fortified a family of unbounded artists. Your absence has gone through me like thread through a needle. Everything I do stitched with its color. W.S. Merwin, Separation. Now that we are again left bereft by his unassailable absence, I urge you to remember that which Robin has taught us: how to live well in the wake of an enduring loss. By his own example, we have witnessed a wise teacher guide his apt students through his profound power to actively listen and to authentically respond to the event of an unthinkable moment. Compelled as he was by the terrible beauty that had led to it, remaining ever mindful of what actions were destined to emerge out of that singular silence. More beauty. More life. Risking beyond what he imagined he had the capacity to endure, Robin has bravely shown us that the strength and divinity of the human spirit can justly prevail. The world breaks everyone, and afterward, some are strong at the broken places. Ernest Hemingway, A Farewell to Arms. We are now asking ourselves, what will this world we yet inhabit look like without Robin's inspiration? His provocation. I actually have that written right there. His North Star brightly shining to guide our many nights' journeys ahead. Imagine a Carthage sown with salt, and all the sowers gone, and the seeds lain however long in the earth, till there rose finally in vegetable profusion leaves and trees of thyme and brine. What flowering would there be in such a garden? Light would force each salt calyx to open in prisms and to fruit heavily, with globes of water. Peaches and grapes are little more than that. And where the world was salt, would be greater need of slaking. For need can blossom into all the compensations it requires. To crave and to have are as like a thing and its shadow. For when does a berry break upon the tongue as sweetly as one longs to taste it? And when is the taste refracted into so many hues and savors of ripeness and earth? And when do our senses know anything so utterly as when we lack it? And here again is the foreshadowing. The world will be made whole. For to wish for a hand on one's hair is all but to feel it. So whatever we may lose, very craving brings it back to us again. Though we dream and hardly know it, longing, like an angel, fosters us, smooths our hair, and brings us wild strawberries. And the perished, whose lack we always feel, will step through the door, finally, and stroke our hair with dreaming, habitual fondness, not having meant to keep us waiting long. Marilyn Robinson, housekeeping. Housekeeping. Buck Creek Farm, Robin's beloved sanctum in a broken world, childhood home to Lisa and Rana, respite and repose to Liz, sojourn for family and friends, mise en scène to two pair of faded vows and cosmic marital union, has prepared for us a hallowed altar of this world's divine, magical lessons. This one rises full and gleaming. Barn's burnt down. Now I can see the moon. Mitsuha Masahide, poet and samurai, student of Basho. That's what remains after the tangible, the flesh, has departed. The beauty, majesty, mystery remains. So does Robin too in us, should we choose to strengthen our living and our doing by his example. This late night sky, July, has stripped light from the valley like a comforter of clover sod and billowed it, exposing bedrock contour as inviting as the swoon of thighs. Come hither, darling, to this place you've always known. Now seed is spangled, wind-born, destined as the pulse of fireflies through the vault of fluttered birch and stars. Who knows the constellations, darling? Venus rising toward Orion on his melancholy watch, or Delphine shimmering her brave regrets. There is a swing, my love. There is a chime. There is a breeze, and starlight sows the crevices and the seas. We know the rest. Robin Metz, New Moon Rising, Bug Creek, Wisconsin.
Thank you, Kelley. I always wanted to be on this stage with Kelley. Nick Regiacorte is professor of English and teaches in the creative writing program. Like Robin, he is a graduate of the Iowa Writers Workshop, the premier program to which Knox has sent many writers. A poet of vision and conscience, he and Robin found much to share and ponder. Robin knew that when he brought Nick to Knox, that Nick would have a profound impact and assure the legacy of the program, and I know that for certain. Please come up, Nick.
I have some remarks I prepared, but hearing all of these memories jogged loose a story of Robin's I thought I would recollect. From a few years ago, he was telling me about a grocery run after workshop. He had to go to Hy-Vee, which is a haunting and terrifying place after midnight. He drove his little Civic over to Hy-Vee on Henderson, he said, and he got out and he saw up ahead a group of teenagers heading into the store also, and one of them chucked a bottle, let it smash in the parking lot. And Robin had the gall to go up and get that young man on the shoulder and say something to him. Well, the guy turned around, ready to hit in the face whoever that was. And Robin said that this young man's face fell when he saw what to him must have seemed an old man, so he decided he better not. And Robin said, "You go pick that up." And the young man said, "I'm not picking that up." And Robin said, "You know what you are? You're a solipsist." And the guy said, "You can't call me that." And Robin said, "You don't even know what that means." "So what if I don't?" He said, "You can always look it up. In the meantime, pick up the bottle." Which I think he did. When did Robin and I drop the conditions? It wasn't long before there was no repaying the man who once reached me in a phone booth on Corso Umberto to give me my life's work, who danced at my wedding, who in a single moment once taught me something essential about grieving, in person and in poems whose every sentence remains exquisite gathering. Since last spring, I've had this fantasy about carrying Robin on my back, up and down the stairs of Old Main. Forget Aeneas. Emboldened by my friend Dennis, I thought seriously about it. The last time Robin was in his office, I was tempted to grab him. Impatient, less to thank or help him than to bear his weight down the stairs and hear his voice in my ear. His absence is abstract to me, but I still ponder the weight many a day as I climb my flights, listening for his growl. His absence is abstract, so how to savor his presence and celebrate the man aright? I thought of Robin performing all the parts of his play as I'd seen him in different voices, the boy Anung and his ancient guide Meshike, both. I wrote a paragraph retelling a story about his mother, how he'd check fearfully for her lighted window on the third floor of the Kensington whenever stepping out of the corner bar at some indecent hour. Robin the boy. I wrote more paragraphs about our visit to the farm 3 summers back, the lush bending greens, that colossus of hill. One paragraph with Robin Meshike driving us in his red Dodge up Mount Hosmer for the view, where he tended to the boys, our little boys, and took to calling each of them honey. Paragraph of estuaries of green and the thrill of wings, a paragraph, of course, of wandering and reunions in the aisles of Horse Falls Lansing Variety Store. Then I figured the truest thing and only real news I could share today was this, from this past February 7th. I think we're all having these dreams. I saw Robin very briefly last night in an airport terminal. Where else? He seemed little worse for the wear, younger, ponytail and cap. The left side of his face followed the right side in lifting to greet me. It was clear that he was regaining his senses, and then some, taking me by the arm to give me some philosophical encouragement that I couldn't fathom. "You go," he finally said. So I went on, further into the mess of dream, woods, where I found the sudden mission and wherewithal to help my tribe improvise windbreaks. Of all things, it had to be done, hatcheting down spruce saplings to weave between older trees. We worked prodigiously, without needing to look at each other, so I don't remember who was with me. I felt shoulders, for all I know, all of yours. The barrier grew tall and wide, but I couldn't believe that it would protect our company from ferocious winds, great calamity that were determined to come. Only finishing the work did I remember Robin begin to gather his meaning, to rather invite the wind, like the wolf of Gubbio, into my heart, into the heart of our camp. I was not to thwart it, not chase it off, but instead maybe raise hut like temple to its very desire for us. Put another way, was he saying, and better than Seneca, you alone belong to the world, and all the world belongs alone to you. Thank you.
Emily Smith built the house that Robin dreamed of and drew on the backs of napkins and restaurant placemats. This is the farmhouse edition at Buck Creek Farm, the manifestation of Robin's soul. When the project began, Emile was not yet in the picture. But when Robin and Emile met, the project was transformed. In Emile, Robin found a kindred spirit, a fellow visionary, fearless and questing, but with the concrete skills and talent to manifest dreams.
Thank you. Our friend Robin. See him shining out of so many eyes in the room. I can't wait to hear more adventure stories. And I know I'm going to have a dream of Robin in a boxcar sometime. Adventures are the stuff of sweet memories, and that's why we're here. I fit in to Robin's vision of his place in Wisconsin. My introduction was 2 sheets of graph paper, which is a little awkward, but they were good drawings. And as we sat and began to understand each other and share the things that needed to be, they inevitably changed and varied and matured and grew into what was to be an addition to a home that was built in 1851 by Norwegians local to Crawford County. And it was a vision that was difficult to picture at first because you're joining new and old. And the attachments were tough in some cases. And one of the most pleasant and heartiest laughs I had with Robin was his discovery of a napkin from a restaurant, undoubtedly either drawn on the way back to Galesburg or from Galesburg to Buck Creek. And the napkin drawing I had never seen. In fact, I think it was drawn at least a couple of years before I had even met Robin and Liz. And it looked more like the finished structure than the graph paper drawings that we started from. And we got a good hearty chuckle out of that. One of the most valuable lessons that sticks with me from Robin is something that he called a guy could say, or a person could. The Norwegians local to Crawford County would use that phrase rather than professing the solution to an issue. They would say, well, a person could. And that was one of the first stories that Robin ever told me. And I was reading the brochure for today, and on the back is something that Robin had said about teaching rather than professing. And I began to realize that the very first story he shared with me was that story. to teach, to share, lessons with suggestions, perhaps. And very valuable to me, and the pace with which Robin and I worked together to make the attachments and build this vision, the conversations moved very quickly, and were a joy, pure joy. So as we began to get to know each other and share a more leisurely time, we had an opportunity on a beautiful evening to step out onto an amazing deck and share a glass of wine as big puffy clouds floated by. And I just said, looks like a kid pulling a wagon. And he said, ooh, if you don't use that in 5 years, it's mine. So as we began to know each other, he kept elbowing me, and I'll do my best as I grow older to follow his advice. He said, just write. Continue to say the things that you want to say, but say them in writing, get them out there. And so with the gift of his pocoat, I wrote a couple poems, and I'll share them with you, even though it'll be my first and your first too, I suppose. The first one uses the metaphor, I guess, right? Stream below, reflecting prairie clouds above, passing leisurely like a child pulling a wagon. That was 5 years it took me to do that. And the other thing that occurred to me was just about teaching. And I hope Robin would approve of this, but I summarized it as an infectious, relentless search for empathy's satisfaction. To me, that's Robin in a nutshell. Often a slow process, just as often not. And some valuable lessons from Robin. There are so many great adventure stories. I hope to hear more later today. And the last I can share with you is it is always fun to get Robin to laugh so hard he'd slap his knee. There was nothing quite like that. And it was easy for him to he could get me to slap my knee or just stop everything I was doing to laugh. But I teased him about coming to Knox for the first time and sitting in the Colbert chair. I sat in the Colbert chair, I would say. He'd giggle, and certainly Colbert left a deep impression, but Lincoln left certainly a longer lasting impression. And that's not fat shaming Stephen Colbert either. Robin's enthusiasm sticks with us. I think it proves that people can be in more than one place at a time. And I think a lot of people in this room can attest to Robin being in more than one place at a time.
It's my privilege to introduce Teresa Amott, who's the president of Knox College, the president that Robin grew to admire, revere, and love. Her humanity and vision, her courage and her determination inflamed his dauntless passion for the college and its potential, and assured him that in her hands, the college that he cherished would be in good hands and will flourish. Thanks.
I think Robin has the best seat in the house. I don't know where he is, but he's here. Robin loved the spoken and the written word. He loved writers. He loved Buck Creek Farm, the driftless area, the Savannah, Galesburg, Carl Sandburg's birthplace, Chicago, Liz, Lisa, Rana, Easy. And he loved Knox College. He loved our tenacity, our humility, our critical minds, our passionate hearts. He was a fierce, obstinate, and uncompromising interrogator of Knox presidents. past and present. Tragically, I will be the last Knox College president to have faced Robin at the monthly faculty meeting and experience my predecessor, Roger Taylor, here today, likely recalls. Robin wanted to know where we spent our money, why one building was renovated and another not. Did I think the college would survive? What was I doing to protect academic freedom? Why weren't there more bur oaks on the campus? At every faculty meeting, I knew I had to face Robin's inquisition. But I always knew that his queries stemmed from his boundless love for Knox and its people, our people, you. Robin came to Knox to teach just a couple of years before I started college at another fine liberal arts institution over a half-century ago. I could have been his student then, his faculty colleague later. But instead, it was my fate in life to be the administrator and become the object of his interrogations. When Ray and I visited him at the farm in the last months of his life, I felt the urgency of his charge to me, to be the steward of this place he loved so fiercely, at a time of such peril for small Midwestern liberal arts colleges. If we go back to when he first arrived, it was the 60s. Now I, as a college president, wrote, "Every American campus was radically transformed by the social movements of the era," or as Carl Norgren said, it was batshit crazy. At liberal arts colleges especially, those movements energized a new faculty cohort who arrived with revolutionary ideas. But every college had its unique alchemy. The particular faculty, the particular individuals who arrived at that moment, merging with the histories of the institutions and their institutional cultures. So to Knox came Robin, with his Ivy League education but steelworker roots, and an extraordinary pedagogy that birthed writers. At Knox, as we heard earlier, Robin and his colleagues created uniquely interdisciplinary experiences like Green Oaks Term. But they built the curriculum from their own stories, intellectual, political, personal. And you've heard some of those stories today. Others are probably best recalled in the privacy of the after parties. But together, they challenged hierarchies connected to the Galesburg community and the Midwestern ecology, and they responded to the student demands of their era. When I became a young faculty member at another liberal arts college, these were my senior colleagues. And as a junior faculty member, even in my own inevitable rebellion against them, I still walked in their footsteps. At Robin's last faculty meeting, I was moved to say that all of us here at Knox are the inheritors of the culture they built, these lions of the faculty. Joseph, you called their names, the lions of the faculty. They hired new faculty as their successors, and then their successors hired the next generation. Each cohort of the faculty remaking the institution for its own future. But when we say today that something is so Knox, we are marking that chain of institutional DNA that makes Knox so different from any other college. This is Robin's stubborn, complex, and challenging legacy to us all. Alongside faculty colleagues who are here today, and others who are no longer with us, he made us who we are, this Prairie College. all of us here today. He made us who we are. And that, put simply, is why we loved him.
I only have one person left to introduce, and she didn't write an introduction for herself. Liz Carlin Metz, we wouldn't be here today without Liz. Craig Choma in the back, and the students, the ushers, the musicians. Could we give them all a big round of applause? Some may think that anyone around Robin plays second fiddle to Robin, but that's not true. If you know Liz Carlin Metz, then you know that's not true. I would like, I could stand up here for a very long time and talk about Liz's accomplishments. This theater department, the Vitalist Theater Company, the plays that she has worked on, the plays that she has directed, the innumerable events, the innumerable students that have passed through here. Liz has put her stamp on, and Liz, come on up. And I want to give her a big hug and say thank you for taking care of Robin, and thank you for everything that you've done.
We're getting a little late, but if you ever attended an event that Robin spoke at, at this time, we are supposed to move to a slideshow that I hope you will share with us. It encompasses Robin's family, Buck Creek, Galesburg, and Knox College, and knits them together rather magnificently to the accompaniment of the Lamoine River Ramblers. So if you will sit back, maybe relax a bit, there will be wine to come. While they're setting up, Robin always called me the cruise director. So as the cruise director, I have some logistics. We will be recessing to When the Saints Go Marching In, as is traditional in a jazz funeral. You have to know how tickled Robin was that he was going to get a jazz funeral. I have no doubt that he will be erratically dancing with us. We will move into the lobby where you are somehow going to be able to pick up glasses of wine, 300 of them. So we will have a toast to Robin, and at that time then, Corrine and Roy Anderson will provide us with a toast, and then we will settle down for a little bit of general carousing. It is a cash bar. There's some cheese and crackers too. So, hit it. So before the guys play us out, I'm going to read one of my very favorite poems of Robin's. There are many, but this is actually particularly tops. When he was putting the book together under the Angel, and we were talking about what poem should go where and what's next, I insisted, and I don't think I had to insist too hard actually, that this should be the last poem. And we had actually different views of it. As you know, this collection is a collection of brief poetry dedicated to his life and his love of Miss Jenky Metz. The last poem is one in which the man appears to be standing on the great bluffs of Crawford County, overlooking the valley that he loves so well. And it's not certain whether he's going to leave or not, or whether he's going to let himself recede into the mist. Robin's view was always that it was the receding into the mist, and mine was, oh no, you are leaping forward and right into my arms. Worry not. So, I still feel that way about this poem. This is Robin. Robin continuing. This is Teresa Amott, Blushing Grouse. The ridge road cleats me. This is physical. And I follow the pulse like a walleye arrows the current of rivers. It is the winter of my withered foliage, though the chickadees still flit a brilliant droop of elderberries. Ahead of me, the lichened oaks and hickories dissolve in patient history. Ahead of me, the ruffed grouse whir. Below, the valley pleats in memory of arbored sorrow. Light drops from the winter sky on tallow wings, a swooping owl. Too late! Retreat! Below, the valley shrouds. Ahead, the ridge road rises. Ruffed grouse whipple and whir. I flutter. I enter the flurry of the wings.